The police were at my door. My own son had called them on me. I froze, the coffee cup slipping in my trembling hands. Sunlight sliced through the blinds in harsh lines, making the living room feel smaller, colder, as if the world had shrunk to just me and the strangers on my porch. "Mrs. Harper," one officer asked, calm, polite, but I could feel the weight behind his words. "We need to speak with you about a complaint filed against you." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard correctly. "A complaint?" I whispered. "By whom?" "Your son, Michael Harper," he said, and the room tilted. Everything I had believed about love, loyalty, family, it cracked like thin ice underfoot. Michael. The boy I'd stayed up all night feeding, comforting, reading to, the one who had whispered, "I'll always take care of you." He had brought strangers into my home to question my ability to live. I managed to whisper, "Come inside." My voice shook, but I had to stay standing, had to not collapse right there on the porch. Inside, the officers asked me to sit and began their questions. Each inquiry felt like an accusation. "Do you take your medications? Can you prepare meals safely? Do you have someone to call in an emergency?" I answered patiently, but my heart raced. And through it all, I watched Michael standing near the window, fists clenched, jaw tight, eyes darting between me and the officers. I wanted to reach out, to tell him that I loved him, that I understood worry, but this wasn't love. This was betrayal, sharp and sudden. When the officers finally left, the room felt emptier than ever. I sank into my armchair, tracing the familiar patterns on the quilt, trying to anchor myself. Michael didn't sit. He didn't speak. "Why?" I whispered, finally. "Why would you do this?" "I'm trying to help," he said. His voice cracked. "I just want what's best for you." "Help?" I asked, tears pricking my eyes. "By calling the police on your own mother. Do you know what that feels like?" And in that quiet, broken silence, I realized that love can be fragile, trust can be shattered in a single moment, and sometimes, the people we believe will protect us are capable of the deepest betrayal. I didn't know how we would move forward, or if we even could, but I knew one thing: I would survive this. I had survived before. And even in the deepest betrayal, there was a chance to find strength, clarity, maybe even forgiveness. For now, all I could do was breathe, remember, and wait. The house felt smaller after the police left. Even the ticking of the clock sounded sharper, like a judgment I couldn't escape. Michael still stood by the window, looking out as if the street beyond could shield him from the weight of what he'd done. I watched him, my chest tight, and felt a strange mix of anger and sorrow. "Sit down, Michael," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." He hesitated, then sank into the chair across from me. He looked exhausted, like someone carrying the world on his shoulders. But the weariness in his eyes didn't erase the sharpness of his actions. I didn't know what else to do," he whispered. "Not what else to do," I said, leaning forward, my hands clutching the quilt in my lap. "You could have called me. You could have asked, for once in your life, if I needed help. You could have trusted me, Michael. Instead, you brought strangers into my home. My home." His gaze dropped. I thought it was safer this way. I thought," his voice broke, and for a moment, I wanted to reach across the table and hold him, to tell him that I understood worry, even when misplaced. But the betrayal cut too deep. "You thought what?" "That I was incapable. That I needed you to police my life." He didn't answer. Instead, he fiddled with the edge of his sleeve, avoiding my eyes. The silence stretched between us, thick with the weight of all the unspoken words. I stood and walked to the window, watching the sunlight fade behind the trees. The familiar scent of the garden drifting in through the open window, the roses I had planted years ago, their petals just beginning to bloom, felt cruelly ordinary, like nothing had changed even though everything had. I raised you, Michael, I said, turning to face him. I stayed up nights for you. I nursed you through fevers. I taught you right from wrong. And now this. My voice trembled, not with weakness, but with heartbreak. Do you know what it feels like to be betrayed by your own child? He finally looked at me, eyes glistening, vulnerability peeking through his carefully constructed armor. I know I hurt you, he said, voice low. But I just wanted to make sure you were safe. Safe? I laughed bitterly, the sound cracking in my throat. I've been living alone for years, Michael. I've cooked my meals, cleaned my house, paid my bills, managed every part of my life. And somehow, calling the police on me is your idea of keeping me safe. His shoulders slumped. I don't know anymore, he admitted. I thought I was helping, but I see now that I might have made it worse. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the storm of emotions inside me. Anger, betrayal, grief, they collided like waves against rocks. But underneath it all, a small, stubborn part of me refused to let this break me entirely. I had survived loss before. I could survive this. You need to understand something, Michael, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. Trust isn't given lightly. It's built over years. And when you shatter it, even if you didn't mean to, it takes time to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. He nodded, though his expression told me he wasn't ready to fully grasp the depth of my hurt. I could see the conflict inside him, the guilt, the fear, the love still lingering, confused and raw. We sat in silence for a while, the room heavy with tension. I remembered the days when he was small, sitting at this same table, asking endless questions about the world, seeking reassurance, seeking connection. And now, years later, he was here, the same table between us, and the questions were different, questions of loyalty, love, and whether family bonds were strong enough to survive betrayal. I don't know how to fix this, he said finally, his voice small. I want to, but I don't know where to start. I looked at him, the boy I had raised into a man who could both love fiercely and hurt deeply. Start by being honest with yourself, I said softly. Start by remembering that what you did matters, that your actions have consequences, and that the people you claim to love can be hurt by the very thing you thought was protection. He didn't respond immediately. He just sat there, head bowed, as if trying to memorize my words, trying to carry them with him like a map through unfamiliar territory. The sun dipped lower, and shadows crept across the room. I could feel the coolness in the air, the faint scent of roses mingling with the aroma of tea I had left on the counter. The day was ending, but the weight of the morning's events pressed on, refusing to fade with the light. I thought about the life we had shared, the promises made, the love given, and how easily it could be overshadowed by fear and misunderstanding. I felt a pang of sorrow, not just for myself, but for him, for the son who had tried to protect me in the only way he knew, and yet, in doing so, had caused me unimaginable pain. Michael, I said, standing and moving closer to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. I don't hate you. But I am hurt. And that hurt doesn't vanish overnight. You need to understand that before we can even think about moving forward. He looked up at me, eyes glistening with tears. I do, he whispered. I understand. I nodded, though inside I knew understanding wasn't the same as forgiveness. That would come later, if at all. For now, all we could do was acknowledge the fracture, the breach of trust, and the long, uncertain road ahead. Later, when he left, the house felt heavier, yet quieter, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for the next chapter of our fractured lives. I sat by the window, tracing the pattern of the blinds on the floor, listening to the distant hum of the street outside. I reflected on the complexities of love, the fragility of family, and the unspoken lessons life continued to teach me, lessons about resilience, about endurance, and about the quiet, painful strength that comes from surviving even when the people we love most turn against us. That night, I went to bed with a knot in my stomach and a heaviness in my chest. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I realized something. Even in the darkest moments, there is a spark that refuses to die. And mine, stubborn and unyielding, would see me through whatever came next. Tomorrow, I would face Michael again. And the truth, painful as it was, would have to be spoken. The next morning, the house felt different. The silence wasn't comforting, it was heavy, almost accusatory. I moved through the rooms, brushing dust from the shelves, arranging the flowers on the counter, but every action felt mechanical, hollow. Even the familiar creak of the stairs under my feet sounded foreign, like a reminder that nothing was safe anymore, not even the life I had built with my own hands. I made tea, the warm aroma doing little to soothe the churning in my chest. I kept glancing at the clock, each tick echoing the questions I couldn't stop asking myself. Had I really raised the son I thought I knew? Or had I simply been fooling myself all these years? The answer came in pieces, in memories that haunted me as I sat at the kitchen table, the steam rising from my cup. I remembered his teenage years, how he'd sometimes lock himself in his room for hours, angry over things I didn't understand. I had thought it was just the turmoil of adolescence, nothing more. But now, in light of what had happened yesterday, I wondered if I had been blind. Had I missed the signs that he was already growing distant, already harboring resentments he never voiced? My thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. It was Emily, my neighbor. She had a gentle presence, always checking in without judgment, and I welcomed it. "Morning, Mrs. Harper," she said, stepping inside. "I heard about yesterday. Are you okay?" I tried to smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. "As okay as I can be," I replied, letting her settle into the chair opposite me. "It's complicated." She nodded, as if understanding that complicated could never fully explain the depth of what had happened. "Michael called the police." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "He did. My own son. Can you imagine?" Emily didn't speak immediately, just reached across the table and held my hand. The warmth of her touch reminded me that not everyone in my life would betray me. "I can't imagine," she said softly. "But I do know that you've always been strong. You'll find a way through this." Her words gave me a small measure of comfort, but the pain in my chest remained. It wasn't just the act itself, it was the realization that trust, once broken, leaves a wound that lingers, a shadow over every memory, every shared moment. As she left, I turned back to the window, watching the sunlight dance over the garden. My roses had bloomed beautifully overnight, a reminder that life continues, indifferent to human suffering. I thought about Michael again, his posture yesterday, the tension in his shoulders, the guilt he couldn't fully express. I wanted to reach out, to mend the rift, but I knew that healing would take more than words. It would take time, patience, and perhaps an honesty we hadn't yet found. The day passed slowly. I went through the motions of my routine, cooking, tidying, even reading a few chapters from my favorite novel. But my mind was elsewhere, tangled in memories of Michael's childhood, the scraped knees I had kissed better, the late-night talks under the glow of the lamp, the whispered promises that now felt fragile and distant. By evening, I knew I had to confront the truth I had been avoiding. I found Michael sitting in the living room, staring at the floor, as if bracing himself for another argument. I took a deep breath and approached him carefully, choosing my words with the care of someone navigating a minefield. "Michael," I began, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "We need to talk about more than yesterday. About the months before. About the things I didn't see, or maybe I didn't want to see." He looked up, eyes wary but attentive. I don't know what to say," he admitted. "Then listen," I said. "When you started growing distant, when the calls became less frequent, when the tone of your voice changed, I noticed. But I told myself you were busy, that you had your own life. And I tried not to worry. But maybe I should have. Maybe I should have seen that something was wrong between us before it came to this. He flinched, as if my words struck him in a place he hadn't expected. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he murmured. I know, I said, softer now, the edge in my voice giving way to sorrow. But intentions don't erase consequences. You crossed a line, Michael. And now, we both have to navigate the aftermath. He nodded, eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'm sorry, he whispered. I really am. I thought I was helping. I thought I was protecting you. I shook my head slowly. Protection isn't about control, Michael. Protection isn't about fear. It's about trust, about understanding the person you love enough to let them live their life, even when you're worried. And yesterday was fear masquerading as care. He didn't respond immediately, just sat there, absorbing the weight of my words. And in that silence, I realized that this was the beginning, not of reconciliation, but of a reckoning. A reckoning that would force us both to confront the cracks in our relationship, the misunderstandings, and the betrayals, big and small, that had accumulated over the years. I thought about the future, about the conversations yet to be had, the moments of anger and sorrow that would come before any healing could begin. And I felt a quiet determination settle within me. I would face it all. The hurt, the disappointment, the fear. Because if I didn't, if I allowed the betrayal to define the rest of my life, then the pain would never end. As the evening deepened and shadows stretched across the room, I sat back, feeling the weight of the day pressing on me. I thought about Michael again, about the boy I had raised with love and hope, and about the man who had surprised me with his actions. And despite everything, despite the tears and the heartbreak, I held on to a fragile hope, that one day, we might understand each other again. For now, all I could do was breathe, observe, and wait. And remember that love, even when tested, is never simple, never guaranteed, but always worth the effort to protect, to nurture, and sometimes, to forgive. The next morning, the house felt heavier than usual. The air seemed thick, almost oppressive, like it had absorbed the weight of yesterday's events and was holding it against me. I moved slowly through the rooms, brushing dust from the shelves, adjusting the curtains, but the motions felt hollow, perfunctory. Every familiar sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the stairs, even the ticking of the wall clock, echoed in a way that reminded me I was no longer alone in my own grief. I made tea and carried it to the table, trying to steady my trembling hands. My mind kept returning to Michael, to the way he had looked at me yesterday, the guilt barely hidden behind his carefully composed mask. I couldn't reconcile the boy I had raised with the man who had brought the police into my home. Could I ever? And more importantly, should I? I heard the soft click of the door opening and turned to see him standing there again, hesitating. He looked tired, disheveled even, as if the weight of yesterday had physically worn him down. "Mom," he began, but then faltered. I want to explain." I gestured for him to sit. "Go ahead," I said, my voice steady, though the storm inside me raged. He took a deep breath. "I didn't just call the police yesterday. I've been worried for months. Maybe even years. Not just about you living alone, but about what could happen if something went wrong and I wasn't there to help." I nodded slowly, listening. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him that concern doesn't justify betrayal. But another part of me wanted to understand, to trace the fear that had driven him to this extreme. "I remember last winter," he continued, voice quiet, "when you slipped on the icy steps. I wasn't there. I felt helpless. And I promised myself I'd never feel that helpless again. So I started keeping tabs, calling more, checking more. And then, I guess I overstepped. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I was controlling you." The words cut through me like glass. There was truth in them, a twisted kind of love, but it didn't erase the hurt. "Michael," I said softly, "there's a difference between care and control. Between love and fear disguised as love. You've crossed that line. And it hurts. Deeply." He flinched. "I know. I see that now. He swallowed hard. "I didn't want to lose you." I looked at him then, really looked, seeing the boy I had once held in my arms, now grown into a man who was both caring and flawed, capable of love and capable of hurt. "You don't lose me, Michael," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "Not completely. But you risk something else. You risk the trust between us. And that isn't easily repaired." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I understand. I want to make it right. Somehow." I sighed, feeling the tension inside me slowly unwind, though not disappear. Making it right isn't simple. It takes time. It takes honesty, not just words but actions. And even then, we may never go back to what we were. But we can try, if we're willing. The afternoon stretched long and quiet. I busied myself with small chores, each one grounding me, keeping me tethered to the familiar even as my mind wandered. I thought about the years of our life together, the scraped knees, the late-night stories, the whispered promises, and wondered where the cracks had first appeared. I realized that perhaps I had missed the subtle signs, the moments when Michael's love had begun to warp into fear, when protection became control. As evening fell, the shadows in the room lengthened, casting the familiar furniture into strange, elongated shapes. I could smell the faint scent of the roses outside mingling with the aroma of the tea I had brewed, comforting and ordinary, almost defiant in the face of the turmoil inside me. Michael sat quietly on the sofa, watching me as I moved through the room. For a moment, I felt the fragile thread of connection between us, taut but unbroken. "Mom," he said finally, breaking the silence. "There's something else, something I haven't told you." I stopped mid-step, my heart lurching. "What is it?" He hesitated, then spoke, his voice low and unsteady. "It's about the house, about the finances. I might have acted, without thinking. I didn't want to scare you, but..." I froze. A cold chill ran down my spine. The house, my home, the place I had lived for decades, filled with memories, safety, and love, was suddenly a place of uncertainty again. "Michael," I said slowly, a warning in my tone, "tell me exactly what you mean." He swallowed hard, eyes avoiding mine. I might have moved some accounts, just to ensure things were in order if something happened to you. I didn't touch your savings, not really, but I may have shifted a few things without asking. The room spun. My hands gripped the edge of the counter so tightly my knuckles whitened. "You moved money? Without my knowledge?" "I thought it was the right thing to do," he said quickly, almost pleading. "I didn't want to hurt you. I panicked. Panic. Fear. Control. Betrayal." The words collided in my mind. And yet, beneath it all, a small, stubborn part of me refused to let despair take over completely. I had faced hardship before, I had survived loss and grief that seemed insurmountable. I could survive this too, but I would not let it go unchallenged. "Michael," I said, voice firm now, though still tinged with sorrow, "what you've done goes beyond concern. You've crossed a line that cannot simply be undone with words. We need boundaries. We need honesty. And above all, we need respect, for me, for this home, for the life I've built." He nodded, finally meeting my eyes. "I understand. I want to do better. I swear, I do." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow across the living room. The roses outside swayed gently in the evening breeze, their scent comforting and familiar. I realized then that life, even when fraught with betrayal and hurt, continues. The challenge is how we navigate it, how we respond to those we love when they stumble, when they hurt us, and when they fail to live up to the promises they once made. That night, I lay awake, thinking of Michael, of the fractured trust, of the uncertainty that lay ahead. And yet, amid the pain, there was a quiet resolve, a determination to face the truth, to confront the challenges, and to protect the dignity of my own life. No matter what came next, I would not be broken entirely. I would survive. I had always survived. And even if the road to forgiveness and understanding was long and winding, I would walk it, step by step, with my heart open and my mind alert. Tomorrow, I knew, would bring another test, another revelation perhaps, another chance to see if our bond could withstand the storms we had both unleashed. And I would face it, as I always had, with courage, with wisdom, and with the stubborn belief that even in betrayal, there is room for growth, understanding, and, maybe one day, peace. The following morning, the air in the house felt charged, heavy with anticipation. I moved from room to room, trying to keep busy, but my thoughts kept returning to Michael and his quiet confessions the night before. I made breakfast, the familiar sizzle of eggs and toast failing to comfort me as it once had. Every sound, the clink of the spoon against the cup, the hum of the refrigerator, seemed amplified, echoing in my chest. Michael didn't join me immediately. I heard him pacing in the living room, the soft thump of his shoes against the carpet like a warning. Finally, he appeared at the doorway, hesitating. His face was drawn, exhaustion etched into every line. "Mom," he said softly, "I think we need to talk." "Really talk?" I gestured for him to sit at the kitchen table. My hands rested on the worn surface, knuckles white, heart racing. "Go ahead," I said, steadying my voice. "I'm listening." He sank into the chair, looking down at his hands. "I didn't realize how much I'd hurt you. When I moved the accounts, I thought I was helping. I thought I was protecting you from things I thought might happen. But I see now that it wasn't my place." I nodded slowly, feeling a cold lump in my stomach. "Michael, protecting someone doesn't give you the right to undermine their life. To take actions without their knowledge, no matter how well-intentioned. That's not protection. That's control." His shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I thought I saw the boy I had raised, the one who used to hide under the bed during storms, seeking reassurance. "I know," he whispered. I panicked. I didn't think. And then, when I called the police yesterday, I thought it would ensure your safety. I never meant to hurt you." I pressed my lips together, trying to hold back tears. "Intentions don't erase consequences, Michael. And you've caused a fracture here that won't heal overnight. It might never fully heal. Do you understand that?" He nodded slowly. "I do. I want to make it right. I want to fix this." "Fix it?" I repeated, voice tinged with disbelief. "You can't just fix it. You've betrayed me in ways I didn't think possible. And trust, once broken, is not easily restored." A long silence followed. I could hear the distant hum of the street outside, the faint rustle of leaves in the garden, the soft ticking of the wall clock. And in that silence, I realized something. I had reached a turning point. I could no longer remain passive, allowing the betrayal to define the rest of my life. I had to confront it, face it head-on, and demand the honesty and respect I deserved. "Michael," I said finally, my voice calm but firm, "there's something you need to understand. You may have thought you were protecting me, but you've overstepped. And it's not just about the money or the calls or the police. It's about respect, about boundaries, about recognizing that I am capable of managing my own life. Do you hear me?" He met my eyes then, really met them, and I saw a flicker of remorse, fear, and, surprisingly, understanding. "I hear you," he said quietly. "I didn't realize. I thought I was doing the right thing." "You didn't," I said simply. "And now we have to deal with the fallout." The morning stretched into afternoon. We spoke at length, revisiting past moments, tracing the subtle ways our relationship had eroded over the years. I remembered his teenage defiance, the whispered secrets he never shared, the times I had excused his distance as normal adolescent behavior. And I realized that some cracks had existed for years, unnoticed, unaddressed, until yesterday brought them crashing into the open. I thought about the promises he had made as a child. "I'll always take care of you," he had whispered, eyes bright with determination. And now, those promises had become a cruel irony. The boy who had pledged loyalty had acted out of fear and control, leaving me to navigate the aftermath of his decisions. By late afternoon, I felt a mix of exhaustion and clarity. I had confronted the immediate betrayal, laid bare my emotions, and forced Michael to acknowledge the consequences of his actions. But beneath it all, a deeper reckoning awaited, one that would require us both to face the unresolved tensions of the past, the unspoken resentments, and the mistakes that had led us to this fractured moment. Michael stood to leave, pausing at the door. "Mom," he said, voice low, hesitant, "I want to try. I want to make amends. I know it will take time, but I'm willing." I nodded, a small, guarded gesture of acknowledgement. "Time is all we have, Michael. And even then, it may not be enough. But it's a start." As he left, the house seemed quieter, the weight of the morning's confrontation settling into the walls. I moved through the rooms, touching familiar objects, the worn armchair, the table where we had shared countless meals, the quilt I had stitched with my own hands, and felt a strange mixture of grief and resolve. I realized then that survival wasn't just about enduring hardship or betrayal. It was about facing the truth, no matter how painful, and refusing to let it consume you. It was about finding strength in vulnerability, clarity in confusion, and hope amid despair. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the day's events, the words exchanged, and the silent understandings reached. I thought about Michael, about the son I had loved unconditionally, and about the man who had challenged that love in ways I had never imagined. And I knew this, the journey ahead would be difficult, fraught with tension, heartbreak, and perhaps moments of unexpected reconciliation. But I would face it all, as I always had, with courage, wisdom, and an unwavering belief in my own resilience. Tomorrow, I knew, would bring new challenges, new revelations, and the opportunity to confront the deeper betrayals that lay beneath the surface. And I would meet them, not with fear, but with the quiet, determined strength that had carried me through a lifetime of trials and heartbreak. The next morning, I awoke to the quiet hum of the house, the familiar sounds of everyday life tinged with unease. I moved slowly, each step measured, as if the floor itself might betray me. The sunlight spilling through the blinds painted long shadows across the room, a reminder that even in the brightest day, darkness lingers. I found Michael in the living room, his posture stiff, hands fidgeting with a folded piece of paper. There was a tension in the air that made my chest tighten. "Mom, I need to show you something," he said, voice low, almost fearful. I gestured for him to sit, though every instinct screamed that I should brace myself. He unfolded the paper with trembling hands and handed it to me. It was a document from the bank, showing several transactions I hadn't authorized. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the numbers, trying to understand, trying not to breathe too loudly. "Michael, what is this?" I didn't tell you before," he admitted, voice breaking. "I moved some of your savings into accounts I thought would be safer. I didn't steal anything, Mom, I swear. I thought I was protecting you, but You call this protection?" I interrupted, gripping the edge of the table so tightly my knuckles whitened. "This is a betrayal. You made decisions about my life, my money, my home, without asking me. without even consulting me. Do you know what this feels like? His face paled. I thought I was doing the right thing. I wanted to make sure you'd be okay if something happened. Something happened? I echoed, incredulous, the room spinning. You mean to say that your fear gave you the right to undermine everything I've built? The life I've managed alone for years. I didn't mean to hurt you. His voice cracked, tears brimming in his eyes. I didn't want to lose you, Mom. I felt a wave of grief, anger, and disbelief crash over me. The betrayal wasn't just yesterday. It had been building, silently, over months, years even, disguised as concern. The boy who had promised to take care of me had instead undermined my autonomy, my trust, and the home that was mine. I raised you, Michael, I whispered, voice trembling. I gave you everything I had. And this is how you repay me. I didn't think, he said, finally looking me in the eyes, raw honesty cutting through the fear. I didn't think about how it would feel for you. I only thought about what could happen if I didn't act. And yet, acting without my knowledge is exactly what caused the harm, I said firmly. Protection isn't the same as control. You can't force safety at the expense of trust. You can't decide what's best for someone else without asking them. Do you understand that? He nodded slowly, the weight of my words sinking in. I understand. I see it now. I really do. For a long moment, we sat in silence, the room heavy with the unspoken, the realization of what had been done, and the knowledge that our relationship had shifted irreversibly. I thought about the countless nights I had stayed awake worrying for him, the endless patience, the love that had never wavered. And now, he had brought fear into my home, strangers into my life, and shaken the foundation of trust we had spent decades building. I need to know something, Michael, I said finally, voice calm but resolute. Why didn't you tell me about these transactions earlier? Why hide them? Was it fear? Pride? Or something else? He hesitated, swallowing hard. I didn't want to disappoint you. I didn't want you to think I wasn't taking care of you properly. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now that I only made it worse. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath to steady the storm inside me. The betrayal had cut deep, leaving wounds I wasn't sure would heal. And yet, beneath the anger, beneath the heartbreak, there was a flicker of understanding. He had acted out of fear and love twisted into control. The intent didn't excuse the act, but it explained it. You've learned a hard lesson today, Michael, I said softly. Love is not possession. Care is not control. You cannot protect someone by taking their power away. Do you understand that? He nodded, tears streaming down his face. Yes, Mom. I understand. I felt the quiet pull of time, the inevitability of the path ahead. Rebuilding trust would be slow, painstaking. But the first step had been taken, honesty. The next would be action, true accountability, and perhaps, one day, forgiveness. The evening shadows stretched long across the floor, mingling with the fading light of the setting sun. I walked through the rooms, touching the familiar objects, the quilt I had sewn, the photographs lining the mantel, the table where so many meals and conversations had happened, and felt a mixture of sorrow and resolve. Betrayal, I realized, is not just a single act, it is a series of choices, a slow erosion of trust and understanding. And surviving it requires clarity, courage, and a refusal to be defined solely by the pain inflicted by others. That night, I lay awake, thinking of Michael, the son I had raised, the man who had acted out of fear, and the fractured relationship that now defined our lives. And I knew, with quiet certainty, that whatever came next, confrontation, reconciliation, or further revelations, I would face it with the strength that had carried me through loss, grief, and heartbreak before. The road ahead would be painful, yes, but it was ours to walk. And I would walk it, step by step, heart open, eyes wide, ready to confront whatever truths lay hidden in the shadows of love, family, and trust. The next morning, I didn't sleep well. The memory of the documents, the police at my door, the weight of Michael's actions pressed against me like a physical burden. I moved slowly, mechanically, through the kitchen, pouring tea and staring out the window at the garden. The roses were still blooming, oblivious to human strife, and for a moment, I envied their simplicity. Michael appeared in the doorway, hesitating. He looked older, wearier than his years, the lines of guilt and fear etched into his face. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk? Fully talk?" I gestured for him to sit. My hands gripped the table, knuckles white, my heart hammering. "Go ahead," I said, voice calm but still beneath the surface. He took a deep breath. I want to be honest with you about everything. All the decisions I've made, all the things I tried to hide. I need you to know why I did it, even if it doesn't excuse anything. I nodded slowly. "I'm listening. But know this, honesty won't erase the betrayal. It won't magically repair the trust you've broken." "I know," he whispered, eyes downcast. "But I have to try." He recounted, in quiet detail, the fear that had driven him, the winters when he imagined me falling, the times he feared illness or accidents, the growing anxiety that had led him to take control over my finances and call the police. Each confession struck me like a blade. Every word confirmed the depth of his fear, the twisted logic of love turned into control, the consequences of his actions. When he finished, he looked at me, raw, exposed, waiting for judgment. "I know I've hurt you," he said, voice breaking. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to make amends. I want to fix this, Mom." I sat in silence, absorbing the weight of his words, the full magnitude of the betrayal, the intentions and mistakes intertwined. My chest ached, not just from anger, but from heartbreak, from the realization that the boy I had raised into a man capable of love had also become capable of deep hurt. "You've caused damage," I said slowly, voice trembling with restrained emotion. "Not just yesterday, not just with the money, but over the years. Control, fear, secrecy, these things build up. They erode trust. And repair takes more than words. Do you understand that?" He nodded, eyes glistening. "Yes, Mom. I do. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll prove it to you, step by step." I drew in a deep breath, feeling the tension in my body slowly ebb, though the wound remained raw. "Then start," I said softly, "by respecting my autonomy. By trusting me. By asking, not deciding. And by being patient. Nothing else will matter if you don't do these first steps." He swallowed hard, nodding again, determination flickering in his gaze. "I will. I swear." We sat together for a long while, the room silent except for the ticking of the clock and the faint rustle of leaves outside. I thought about the years we had shared, the promises made, the love given, and the way fear had twisted that love into something unrecognizable. And I realized that this confrontation, painful as it was necessary. Because without facing it, without laying bare the hurt and the betrayal, there could be no hope of repair. No understanding. No path forward. By late afternoon, I felt a cautious sense of clarity. Michael had acknowledged the betrayal, confessed the motives behind his actions, and expressed a willingness to rebuild. But I knew that willingness alone wasn't enough. Actions, consistency, and time would determine whether trust could be restored. "Mom," he said finally, standing to leave, "thank you for hearing me. I know I've made this difficult, but I want to try. I really do." I nodded, a small, guarded gesture of acknowledgement. "Time will tell, Michael. But this is the first step." After he left, the house felt quieter, almost serene, but the weight of the morning lingered. I moved through the rooms, touching familiar objects, the quilt, the photographs, the table where so many meals and conversations had taken place, and felt the mixture of grief and resolve settle over me. I thought about the lessons I had learned. Love can be flawed, trust can be fragile, and even the people we hold closest can hurt us. Yet, survival isn't about avoiding pain, it's about facing it, understanding it, and choosing to move forward with wisdom and strength. As evening fell, I sat by the window, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The roses outside swayed gently in the breeze, resilient and steadfast, and I felt a quiet determination rise within me. No matter the betrayal, no matter the mistakes, life continues. And I would continue to, stronger, wiser, and prepared to face whatever came next. For the first time in days, I allowed myself a deep breath, feeling the knot in my chest loosen slightly. The confrontation had been painful, the revelations devastating, but clarity had emerged from the chaos. I knew the path to healing would be long and fraught with challenges, but the first cracks of understanding had appeared. And that, I realized, was enough for now. Tomorrow would bring its own tests, perhaps more revelations, but I would face them with the resilience that had carried me through a lifetime of trials. I would survive. And through survival, I would find the strength to love again, to trust cautiously, and to navigate the fragile, complex web of family, betrayal, and reconciliation. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, painting the living room in warm, forgiving tones. I moved through the house slowly, deliberately, savoring the familiar rhythm of my home. After days of tension, heartbreak, and confrontation, there was a quiet, fragile peace settling over the rooms. Michael was in the kitchen, quietly preparing breakfast. The air between us felt different, not fully repaired, but no longer thick with anger and mistrust. His movements were careful, deliberate, almost reverent, as if he were navigating a space that had once been fragile and broken. I watched him for a moment, a mixture of relief and cautious hope rising within me. "You're quiet this morning," I said softly. He glanced at me and offered a small, tentative smile. "I'm trying," he said. "Trying to do right by you, by us." I nodded, feeling the weight of the past days. Trust, once fractured, cannot be rebuilt overnight. But acknowledgement, honesty, and effort, these were the first steps toward healing. We ate breakfast together in silence at first, the familiar clinking of dishes and the aroma of coffee filling the room. Then, slowly, conversation returned, tentative but real. He asked about the garden, about my plans for the day, about small things that had once been ordinary but now felt extraordinary in their simplicity. After breakfast, I moved to the window, letting the sunlight warm my hands as I touched the blooms of the roses outside. The garden had always been my sanctuary, a place of resilience and growth, and today it felt symbolic of the fragile hope in my own life. "Mom," Michael said gently, coming to stand beside me, "I know I can't undo the past. But I want you to know I'll spend every day trying to earn your trust back. I want to learn how to care without controlling." I turned to look at him, really looked, seeing both the boy I had raised and the man he was becoming. "I know you're trying," I said softly. "And that's all anyone can ask. But remember, love isn't about fear, and care isn't about possession. It's about respect, patience, and honesty. That is what keeps a family whole." He nodded solemnly. "I understand." The morning passed into afternoon. We worked quietly around the house, sharing small tasks and gentle conversation. There were moments of tension, yes, reminders of the betrayal that had shaken us, but there were also moments of connection, brief sparks that reminded me of the bond we had shared all along. As the day waned, I felt a deep sense of gratitude, not for the absence of conflict, but for the courage to face it, to speak the truth, and to allow space for understanding. I thought about the years I had lived, the challenges I had faced, and the moments of heartbreak that had threatened to break me. And I realized that each trial, each betrayal, each sorrow had taught me resilience, empathy, and the quiet strength of the human heart. That evening, as the sun set and the room filled with warm, golden light, I sat with Michael by the window. The roses swayed gently in the breeze, their petals catching the light, and I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in days. "Michael," I said softly, "I won't pretend that everything is fixed. The past can't be erased. But we can move forward. Slowly, carefully. Together." He reached for my hand, a tentative gesture, and I held it, feeling the tentative thread of trust beginning to weave itself back into our lives. "Together," he agreed. I leaned back in my chair, reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. Betrayal had cut deep, fear had twisted love, and mistakes had been made. But even in the darkness, there was light. Even in heartbreak, there was hope. And even when trust seemed shattered beyond repair, patience, honesty, and effort could begin to mend what had been broken. I realized then, fully, that life is a series of tests. Family, love, and loyalty are never guaranteed, they are earned, maintained, and sometimes painfully reclaimed. But the strength to survive, the courage to forgive, and the wisdom to see beyond hurt are the legacies we leave behind. And in that quiet, golden evening, I felt a profound sense of clarity. Love is not flawless, trust is not absolute, and life is not fair. But resilience, understanding, and the willingness to face pain head-on, these are what define us, what allow us to endure, and what create the possibility of healing even the deepest wounds. I squeezed Michael's hand gently. "Remember this, son, mistakes happen. People fail. But the measure of a life is not in perfection, it's in the ability to rise after betrayal, to act with honesty, and to nurture the bonds that truly matter." He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes, and I knew he understood, even if fully forgiving oneself is a journey longer than a single day. As night fell and the house settled into quiet, I felt a peace I hadn't known in a long time. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in days, I felt hope. Hope that trust could slowly be rebuilt, that love could survive even when tested, and that the lessons of hardship could be carried forward, not as a burden, but as wisdom. And in that moment, I understood fully, life, with all its betrayals and heartbreaks, also offers the possibility of redemption, renewal, and the quiet, enduring strength of family. No matter what the future held, I would face it with resilience, with honesty, and with the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, the heart can find a way to heal.